What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about the Gifted Conviction, the new exotic chess piece for our hunter with that beautiful little jolt, stream up into the air, ascension, creating a bunch of little damage explosions for us. So we're going to cover this little build for y'all on both Arc as well as Prismatic to give you guys some options. So the Gift of Certainty is the perk on the Gifted Conviction right here. So activating Ascension or Tempest Strike throws bouncing explosives at nearby targets that jolt them and damage them. Jolting these nearby targets also gives us damage resistance, which is great because it takes us through GMs no problem. The gameplay that you see is in a GM, the Warden of Nothing, for both the Arc and Prismatic sides of this build. So it is an easy peasy lemon squeezy build that y'all can use while dealing with a bunch of champions at clear, as well as that damage resistance. So, for the Arc subclass right here, we got ourselves a Gathering Storm, Marksman Dash with Triple Jump, our Combination Blow as well, because we get this back in that little bit of 40 seconds, plus when we get the feats with our ability, gives us our class ability back, so it can pair perfectly with our Tempest Strike as well as our Ascension. And then I personally went with Pulse Grenades on this build, but Storm Grenades also very good. Like these a little bit better on Apotheosis or something like our Arc Titan, so they can move around a little bit more, but not too shabby at all. Now we do got Ascension, our new Arc aspect that we got this season or this episode. While airborne, consume your class ability to summon Arc Staff that propels us upward, creating a burst of energy that amplifies us as well as jolts target. So when we're using Ascension on this, paired with Gifted Conviction, we're getting that double jolt, damage resistance, and amplified. Now on top of that, we are going to be using Tempest Strike as well, so we're going to be able to pair these perfectly together, stunning those overload, creating that jolt, wiping out waves on waves of adds, if you will. So while sliding, activate your melee ability to unleash a devastating uppercut that travels on the ground in front of you, damaging the targets and jolting targets. So again, we're getting jolt on both of these, plus with the Gifted Conviction chess piece. So the ability spam, if you will, of this, of using the Gifted Conviction to fly up, create those bouncing explosions, as well as Ascension plus Tempest Strike, is pretty disgusting. On top of that, we got our Fragments right here. Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to that incoming damage. Pairs well because this is like a melee build, in my opinion, that also takes into account our class ability with our hunter, so dodging, to be able to use the Ascension perk. Right here, we're going to use Spark of Feedback, so taking melee damage briefly increases our outgoing damage, so allowing us to have a better combination blow as well as Tempest Strike. Spark of Recharge, while critically wounded, we get our melee and grenade back, allowing us to spam these even quicker, which is beautiful because then again we can use the Tempest Strike right here consistently, allowing us to proc that Gifted Conviction as well. Plus, last but not least, Spark of Amplitude, defeating targets while we are amplified creates orbs of power, so beautiful way for us to get back our super a little bit faster. Plus, we're using that orbs to have that armor charge for us. So for the Arc side of things and this build with our mods, we were building it out for that Arc synergy with having Arc Weapon Surge and Time Dilation. On top of that, for stats that we went with, we have Resilience as our number 1, Strength as our number 2, with Mobility as our number 3. I had this built out to 60 because the difference in the time between tier 6 right here and then tier 10 was only about 7 to 10 seconds. Plus, with our mods, Focusing Strike as well as Bolstering Detonation right here, causing damage with our grenade and melee, is giving us back our class ability a little bit faster anyways. So we're building that on the top of the Arc synergy that we have with the Arc Surge, Time Dilation, as well as Distribution, allowing us to get back all of our abilities, plus Recuperation to help us with that survivability. So we're building this out heavy to be able to dodge and use Strength, so we can get that Gifted Conviction, I should say, to proc with Ascension and that Tempest strike. Up to you for whatever you're going into. The GM had sniper, solar, and void resistance, so that's what I went with. Plus harmonic siphon, kinetic siphon with heavy ammo finder. You will see why in a second. Plus that powerful attraction, so every time we do dodge or use our class ability, also counts for our ascension. We're picking up those orbs of power that are nearby us. Now for the weapons that we have on this side of the build, we're using Outbreak Perfected, Indebted Kindness, as well as that Hothead, just because very good for the DPS side of things. That servitor gets melted by rockets in this GM, especially since they are one of the overload weapons. Now we do have the Indebted Kindness right here. I do like lead for gold for on this, but the beacon shots with volt shot, very good. We have the jolt potential on this and the arc synergy. Then of course Outbreak is just disgusting with rewind rounds. Plus we're using this for our barrier. We have our sidearm for our unstoppable, and then all the arc that we're creating on the build is giving us our overload champions. Now when we move on to the prismatic side of this build, which I will say I think I like the arc version a little bit better, but we are using our shadow shot deadfall for that little debuff on those enemies, plus very good at keeping those enemies at bay. Marksman's dodge with a triple jump, threaded spike, so we get 3 of them, as well as our magnetic grenade, helping us to weaken targets and do a little bit more damage via our artifact. Now we are using ascension, of course, because we gotta get that gifted conviction to proc. While airborne, we consume that class ability to propel ourselves upwards with that energy burst amplifying us and jolting targets with that stylist executioner. So hopefully we can use this build to go invisible pretty consistently as well with those elemental debuffs that we are getting. So a beautiful little combination of having the weaken from this. This gives us a sever, as well as the ascension is giving us jolt on those targets with the gifted conviction. On top of that, for our fragments, we got Faucet of Hope right here. While we have an elemental buff, our class ability recharges quickly, so we're going to be able to use this a lot faster with the 70 mobility, getting it very quick on those elemental buffs because amplification coming quickly with the ascension right here. Plus we're going to get invisibility pretty often as well with stylist executioner. Now we're using Faceted Grace on top of that. Defeating targets with kinetic weapons grants us transcendent energy. Defeating targets with super also grants us and nearby allies that transcendent energy. So using this to pair with our transcendent grenade and stuff like that, because it is like a little mini super. Facet of Courage, your arc, solar, void abilities deal increased damage to targets affected by that darkness debuff, so that is why we are using this as well, to get that darkness debuff to spread a little bit easier. Facet of Ruin right here, we are getting increased size of those stasis crystal explosions, as well as frozen enemies, as well as our solar ignitions. We're using this a little bit for our mobility, plus on top of that, if we do get a lot of that stasis freeze, since enemies are being frozen a bunch by those transcendent warlocks and their bleak watchers, it helps a lot with that in the end game content. We are using Facet of Dominance as our last one, so that void grenade is going to weaken targets. Why we are using that magnetic grenade, so we can weaken, proc that abyss expansion, so we can get that 35 damage increase with our void weapons. Now also, as for our mods that we have on this for the prismatic side of things, I built it out again. 1 for resilience, 2 this time was for our intellect, so we can have that tether as much as often, as well as our mobility is at 70. 1 because, like I said, it comes back quickly anyways, only a couple seconds between 7 and 10. Plus with this build, we're using Font of Agility, which gives us plus 30 for our mobility when we have that armor charge, giving us basically a triple 100 build. On top of that, we're using Focusing Strike as well as Bolstering Detonation, so we can get our class ability back even faster with this build. Plus we're going to get our grenade back and melee back a little bit faster because of this momentum transfer and our fragments that we have. Heavy ammo finder with Scott to help up our teammates with that harmonic siphon, because we're using void weapons on this build with the arbalist, again in the Warden of Nothing, sniper damage, resistance, as well as solar void for that little bit of end game content stuff. A lot of snipers in that, lot of those 2 burns. Last but not least, right here, we're going to use Insulation to get back our class ability when we pick up orbs of restoration, to give us our rest of our abilities, if you will, as well as distribution and time dilation, so gives us that 100 mobility for a little bit longer, as well as that distribution gives us all of our abilities down when we use our class ability near targets. So when we move on to the weapons for this side of things, we're going to be using our Arbalist right here for those champions and the barrier side of things. We're going to be using this Icolos hand cannon, stats for all, one for all. Definitely a banging, even though it is a 180, was liking this a lot for that GM for sure, with the overload potential of this. And then I was using the Osprey Braytech right here with the Envious Lasting Impression on this to give us a nice juicy little bit of damage increase, especially with the debuff of weakening on those bosses and the expanding void that we have inside of our artifact. Allows this thing to do some pretty juicy damage, so that's why I went with this. But you could also go with something like Edge Transit, Envious Bait and Switch, even for a little bit more damage consistently, if you will, just because overload for the weapons on this GM was the rockets. Now, as for our artifact right here, nothing too crazy is going to go on this, besides we do need our anti-barrier pulse, unstoppable sidearm, and overload hand cannon. This will allow us to use either of these builds with this specific Hunter's Journal artifact setup. The only one we will have to change at the very end is I usually take off Prismatic Transfer and throw on that Expanding Abyss when I am using the Prismatic version, because we're getting weakened and using those void weapons. But when I'm on the Arc version, I was liking the Prismatic Transfer just a little bit more, because most people are using either the Solar subclass or using that Prismatic subclass, so this helps us to gain a little bit more damage of that as well. But Shield Crash right here is a very good one as well. So when we have Overshield, Woven Mail, or Frost Armor, we're getting our melee. Amplified Radiant, we're getting our grenade, and we're getting that amplified very quickly. Plus right here, we're getting a nice little bit of that Overshield, or I should say amplified, sorry, for the Arc and Prismatic subclass when we have them equipped by picking up those Orbs of Power. So beautiful little combination of this artifact. A little bit longer video because we're using the dual build system right here for Arc and Prismatic on this new Gifted Conviction chess piece. But the combination, like I said, I think I like the Arc version a little bit better than the Prismatic version, but Prismatic is definitely just very good in general because of that little Transcendent that we got, plus the combination of all of those fragments that we got is kind of wild. So very fun little combination of builds for y'all. Test out both of them to let me know which one you guys like better between the Prismatic and the Arc versions of this. But again, I appreciate all you guys for that support lately. Happy Sunday for y'all. Happy Shark Week starts today, so appreciate all you guys again. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.